Okay, we are currently live. Hey, my random weirdos. Welcome back to another Pagan Hour video. Today is going to be a fun Pagan Hour video because we are going to be talking about several witchy topics. One of them being we're going to tell our witchy stories. We're going to tell how we came to the craft, and we're going to tell how we're staying in the craft and why we stay in the craft. So,
Yep.
it's going to be a lot of fun, interesting for sure. Um, Then we're going to be talking about energy work. Energy work is going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun to understand energy work and how to use your own energy.
Mhm.
Oops. And I'm just over here messing around on my computer to make sure everything's running smoothly.
Share.
It's going to be a lot of. There we
Copy. I'm
go.
inviting my friend. My best friend.
There we go. Um, so yes, it's going to be a lot of fun. And then we're going to be talking about protections and how to protect yourself, many different ways to protect yourself, and how to use those protections on jewelry or items that you want to carry with you. So, I'll go ahead and start. But as everybody knows, Copper is my co-host. We also have Amanda. Apparently, she's a lost mermaid on dry land. And then we have the queen hen here. Queen hen will be back in just a little bit. They had to go to work for a second, and they'll be back. And then we have the royal chicken. So yes.
Back, back. Back, back.
Um so I guess I'll start with my witchy journey. Um so my witchy journey started when I was really young. I was think around 12 or 13, somewhere around there. And the thing is I didn't start practicing, like actually practicing until I got older, but I started my research when I was 12 or 13. And the reason behind my research is because there was a lockbox that I had, and inside this lockbox it had an old grimoire from my family line. And it's what got me interested and started into my craft. And I was off and on for many years. But when I got into high school, right around my senior year is when I started to dive really, really deep into my craft, and I started practicing more. And I did have a break period where I kind of just didn't practice. I kind of just then during that time it was a little bit of a rough time for me, so I kind of
Mhm.
just didn't practice. And then, um, about I think 6 months after that, I started really diving deep, and I haven't stopped practicing since. Um, the reason why I continue to practice is it feels like it's a part of me and who I am, and it betters me every day because not only doing the shadow work sits there and teaches you things about yourself you never knew before,
Mhm.
and the shadow work also humbles you so you don't get caught up in your ego. And I really love that aspect. I love where it can humble me for my practice. So I don't sit there and be like, "Oh, I know all. No, I know all." No, I don't want to
Yeah.
do that. I don't want to know all. I don't want to sit there and be, "Oh, I know this. You want to know this? This is how you're supposed to do it. This is the way you need to do it. Do it this way."
Yeah.
And telling somebody to go off on my practice when it's their own practice. Each person has their own practice.
Yep.
And the reason why I keep going is because I can see the positive impact it has on my life. Um, when I wasn't practicing, I was going through real heavy depressions. I was losing a lot of time. As everybody knows from my last live stream, I have DID. And so when I stopped practicing, it was like I was losing so much time, and we were going through really manic depressive bouts, and a lot of stuff was chaotic in my life. And when I got back into the practice, everything leveled off, everything started going back on track. Everything started turning positive. And I want to keep that positivity. I want to keep that going through my life.
Yeah.
And the craft has done that for me. It has done that exact thing for me. And I absolutely love it. And I plan to continue all the way until my last breath. And I hope my kids take an interest in it. I'm not going to force my kids into it. If they want to, they
Oh,
can. They can go for it all they want to.
witchcraft is basically spirituality, not a religion. So,
Mhm.
um,
I'm like,
if the kids want to go to church, everything, let them go to church. If they want to learn how to do the craft, let them go do the craft. Don't make that decision for them, because otherwise you're no different than some, really gung ho fundamentalist Christian who just
mhm.
wants to mind control people.
Yeah. So if my children in the future want to choose their craft, they can choose their craft. I'm not going to stop them from choosing craft. I'm not going to stop them from being Christian. I'm not going to stop them from being Catholic, Muslim, Buddhist, whatever it is. If they want to be it, then they can be it. I'm not going to stop them.
Yep.
It's their choice.
Yep. Definitely.
I'm like, if they are interested in the craft though, and they want to learn, I have no problem teaching them what I've learned and then letting them learn on their own. I'm not going to
That
say, follow my craft. This is how you're supposed to follow. Follow everything I did. No. You listen to what I say and a couple of things. This is some advice I give you. Now take that advice and adhere it to yourself and how you want to do it.
And for those Christians who are on here saying, well, or, kind of cursing us out and everything, there is a certain verse. Let me look it up. Matthew 6, or not, no, no, not Matthew 7:13. Let's see, look that up. Enter ye in that gate, and enter ye in at the straight gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many there be which go in there and there. What the fuck?
Is it?
Okay, but you get the point here. Um, it's that every path is very different for every individual.
Yes. And
Confessing your sins and praying to Jesus and everything. It's a very broad path.
mhm,
It doesn't. It does not pertain to you. You need to figure out your relationship with God.
yes.
Same
And
thing with the craft.
here's another thing, and this is from when I grew up Christian, as most of y'all already know. I grew up going to church and everything with my parents and all that stuff. One of the things that I remember from one of the sermons is the pastor was talking about um, the specific what you were reading that passage. He was talking a bit about that specific passage, and he was talking about how each path for each individual in this room is a completely different path from the person sitting next to you. So you could be walking in the straight and narrow, and the next person next to you could be walking an easy wide path. It doesn't matter on what path you take. It doesn't matter how rocky your path can get. Your relationship with God is the only thing that counts.
Right. And it's like, don't take the wide road because it's easy. Take the narrow road because, believe it or not, life is not easy.
It's absolutely not easy.
I mean, when you do shadow work, we're taking the very steep hill, narrow path kind of goat trail that nobody wants to take because it ends up you falling off the mountain that you just barely got on.
Yes. And even for a person of the craft, the path we take a, and this is my path, this is how I see my path, this is how I depict my path. It started out somewhat okay, it was nice enough where I can walk easily, and then it turned into this goat trail of a trail, and it was this little, and I had to make sure I was walking sideways across it so I didn't fall off the cliff face. and fall off my own path, which there's a couple times I stumbled, yes. And as I keep going on this path, it does widen up again, but it comes back into a very narrow path again. Sometimes that shit's a peak, and you're like, "Oh no, this is gonna be
It's like you're
hard."
standing on a blade basically, trying to balance on that sword blade. I'm like, ah, fuck, no, no, thank
shadow
you.
shadow work is, you can see shadow work is the path that you're walking. As you're doing your shadow work, that's when the path decides to get rough, because you're
Yeah,
going and getting through that roughness in your shadow work. So the path gets rough for you.
and not only does a path get rough, but you also have to watch out for the pits that a lot of people like to either dig themselves into or they just fall into and never get back out. So it is like you have to be aware of those,
Yeah,
um, and acknowledge that you need to get help.
absolutely.
Um, and aside from that, I too grew well for the first portion, like what, maybe 7 years of my life. I had no relations to religion at all, besides what I was exposed to through my grandparents,
Mhm.
and then and my babysitters who went to church, primarily LDS individuals. And there was one morning where my mom picked me up from the babysitter. I'm like, Mom, I like going to church. I want to go to church. She's like, oh, well, okay. Well, there is a Baptist church just down the street. We'll just go to that one. Um, Now she's familiar with the Baptist faith, so we actually went to that church, and the people were all friendly and everything.
Mhm.
I chose that really. I at the age of 7 or 8, I chose that for myself,
Mhm.
and my mom was on it. And on and off, we went to church because she was a single mother, and there were times where we couldn't go. Um, and I became kind of more agnostic, or I started questioning.
Mhm.
And there's some individuals in that church that did not appreciate that, and I just stopped going because I didn't fit in at all, in any really religious group. And so I'm like, whatever. And it was last year, um, or actually, no, I'll go back a little bit. It was after I graduated high school and I went to college where I was very depressed and I was getting more into spiritual stuff, but didn't necessarily understand it like I do now.
Mhm.
And then I just stopped and, I got lost here and there. And what helped me, and it's funny. So I play a half orc magus in Pathfinder. Um, and I got my character into a situation where she accidentally told a secret to a couple of her party members that she was not supposed to say. Um, and the guy that made her make that promise um, really scares her, kind of.
Mhm.
And so she's sitting there at the hotel, and she's like, oh my god, he's gonna kill me, he's gonna kill me. And so she like admits that she told his secret and everything. And they talked it out and everything. And during that time when I was working on my shift, I was thinking about that. I was listening to the song called Feel Alright by Justin O. um and that sparked a major spiritual kind of awakening. And there
Mhm.
was one day where it's like, I need to go to the spiritual shop. I need to go there.
Mhm.
And that, like, it was on a Wednesday. I was staying up, and the shop didn't open until like around 11, 12 o'clock.
Mhm.
Um, I went in there and I talked to the older woman in there, and she didn't know what to do, but she called her daughter up front.
Mhm.
And her daughter explained to me, yeah, you're brought here for a reason. That person is my mentor. And she actually really helped me out through that time, and I felt grounded. I felt I had a sense of purpose, and I didn't start actively practicing and up until that time. Um, and there's been a few things here and there. I've plateaued a little bit, but I've also brought myself back up. And why I will still continue this path is because it has led me to meet some of the most amazing people that I've ever met, including you and Amanda and Izzy and Tyler and the Royal Chicken. Everybody that we talk to. And uh it also led me to seek help for some of the issues that um, that I didn't think I would need to see somebody for, like mental issues. And
So
also has
meeting
me,
everybody made you realize that you had a lot more shadow work to do because you realize you need to go to therapy and work through your
yeah,
spirit
and
issues.
that therapy, I knew there was something wrong with me. I already knew there was something wrong, but I said, hey, I don't need to do this because it wouldn't make a difference whether or not I was diagnosed with this.
Yeah.
But now that I'm talking to people who have mental illness and have exhibited similar behaviors and everything, and shared their experiences, it's like, oh, okay, maybe it's a good idea to get this because that's how I can manage or learn how to cope better
Yeah.
than this. And it can also help out my relationship with my significant other, and even help with my work. um and it's not just the shadow work aspect that we talked about, but it's also very interesting to look at how things evolve
Mhm.
over the period of time. um because what I've noticed in the witch community is they like to look at history through a modern lens, but you can't necessarily do that because the mindsets that the like people of old had are way different than what we have now.
That
They were not as progressive as we are now. They were very, like, you think the Christians in modern age are bad.
now
No.
they had crusaders during that time, and there was a lot of bloodshed, a lot of strictness that was during that time. It was
Yep.
extremely strict.
Like,
And
people know that aborificents such as, like, what, mugwort, I think mugwort is an aborificent. They're
mhm,
like, oh, that's like the old timey, um, plan C or plan B, or birth control. Well, they didn't know about that.
mhm,
You have to apply or not. You have to separate the history from modern day reality.
yes.
Not that they may have thought that, or they may not have. We don't know because we can't necessarily talk to them.
Yeah.
We still need to have those primary sources such as journals, books,
Old grimoires, because there is
old
still some
grimoires.
old grimoires in this world. The one that I had was an old grimoire, except for it got destroyed. So I no longer have that piece of history, and it was an old piece of history.
If
Uh,
only the Vatican can open up their vaults through their library so we can look at some of the grimoires that they have, probably.
you know they've gotta have some freaking grimoires in there. You know, because they confiscated that stuff. They never really destroyed it. They just confiscated it and just took it and put it away in their archives.
And then you have the Nazis who raided like what not yeah they raided libraries, museums, etc., etc. They probably buried it quite a few powerful books themselves. So
Mhm.
And think about back in the Roman days when they had the Alexander Library burned. Can you
yep.
imagine all that from that we all the history that we did lose because of that?
Yeah.
And
And
not to
There's
mention what happened to the Celts.
yeah,
like
Like,
so much is missing from those periods of time that we'll never be able to fully grasp the old history that we're supposed to grasp, because we only know what is in our history books. We only know what is in history resources that we can look into. We don't know the things that have been lost.
mm-hmm.
We don't know the many stories that were told from many different tribes across the world when
Yep,
it was considered tribes and not cities and villages and towns and all that stuff.
right. Um, I just found that interesting. That's kind of why I, keep on studying it. Besides, trying to find myself, despite like I have an identity, but I don't know myself.
Hmm.
Um, and there's that aspect of it. It's
oh yeah.
yeah, it's just interesting.
It's funny that goes into a little bit of the art of war.
Oh yes, yes, I know which quote you're talking about.
If
It's
any
like
of
I
you
know.
know the art of war, you will know that reference. You will
Yep,
know that reference.
it's my favorite quote out of the whole entire book, actually, and it's because it's also the only reason why I know about it is because of Sabaton.
Yes.
One
Yes.
still have not read in my long years long
You
with her.
haven't read the art of war?
No, not yet.
I mean, it kind of applies to our situation. You need to read it because it kind of applies to our situation pertaining to a certain individual.
Pertaining to a
No,
certain issue we're going through.
should read it then.
It's
Yeah.
a, it's
I
a
like
really good read. I'll tell you that right now. It's a really good read. I read it back in high school. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. So
it.
Like, I read only a very small smidgen of it, but that proved useful in general. I'm like,
oh,
oh,
no, my high school we were made to read The Art of War, and for me, I read it before the class that I was supposed to take it in, and that was my senior AP English class. We
mm,
were supposed to be reading that book through the year. I read it in my sophomore year because it really seemed interesting to me. And I was like, ooh, the art of war? I would love to know about the art of war.
but no, it's like it applies to life in general, not just the war, because life
Yes.
is a battle in itself.
Hmm.
Um,
It's
Kind of gruesome in some parts, but
it's like
Sorry.
yeah, it's no problem. It's like it's insanely accurate to a lot of things in life, not just war in life. Like I totally
That's
agree
because
with
my
that.
dog's kind of
Hmm. I totally agree with that because um, I've applied the art of war to my life in multiple occasions. Though sometimes I can still be naive and not pay attention to the situation I'm in and get myself in a predicament where I do have to use some of the war aspect of it.
yeah.
So yeah, The Art of War is definitely good to read. You should read that. Even
That
if
should be
you're
that's actually free on Amazon Kindle. So if you can manage to snag a copy, do it.
yes. Um it not it like it doesn't necessarily pertain to the craft, but it does have aspects that you can take from the art of war and apply it to your craft too. And
Yeah.
when I pointed that reference out, that specific portion of that book, that specific quote applies to your craft as well.
Yes, very much so. Especially when um so people another misconception that a lot of baby witches, including myself, have when first starting out is that the world is out to get them, basically. Somebody is hexing them, or something is trying to get out to get them.
Hmm.
That's simply not going to be the case. A lot of the most of the time, if you're, it's possible that you have many ties that feel like an entity, a separate entity, but or you're making it up in your mind, and that entity that you have in your mind is actually manifesting itself
Hmm.
to you. But
It's
really, the biggest enemy that a baby witch has is themselves. Because I almost lost my mentor to that.
hmm
I thought they did not like me. I thought that a lot of you did not like me because I exhibit certain behaviors or beliefs.
oh honey, there's no way I could never like hate you
Right.
or anything because we could sit there and go back and forth on a lot of shit,
Yep.
and we'll end up coming out of it, like completely out of it, compromised on the fucking same level and understanding of what we were trying to talk about. Even if
Yep.
it's even if it's about politics, even if it's about
Yeah.
different aspects in witchcraft, even if it's just life in general, we can sit
Mhm.
there and go back and forth. And I love that because if you can have that debate and that
Yeah.
conversation and then come to a compromise at the end, that's a fucking friendship that's going to last a lifetime.
Yep. I remember one of our first conversations with each other. I actually remember it. It was a rant. It was a rant.
That's where we kicked off everything too. It's like, yeah,
But it's like I was kind of frustrated at that. I'm like, eh. At least it got out of my system, and then it's like,
yeah.
also avoid Facebook, Facebook at most costs, or at all costs, because, or
Face
no,
here's the thing. A lot of Facebook groups, if you're going to a Facebook group for witchy information, take everything, and I mean take everything with the minutest little grain of salt because it's not going to be accurate. It's not. It's
it's gonna
not.
be TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Tumblr, Amiibo. Is that what it's called? No.
No, amino. Amino, I will say this. If you get onto any of the amino craft ones, and specifically the witchcraft amino, they do have good information on there, but you have to sift through the bullshit because there is bullshit information on there. There's people that are on there just for the aesthetic and they're putting out bullshit.
Yep.
So you
And
need to sift through the information. Make sure you double check that this information is correct. If it's not correct, go ahead and throw that in the trash and look for a different source.
here's this is also the dangers of internet witchcraft in general. A lot of witches will sit there and say, "Oh, you don't need books, you don't need these kinds of sources whatsoever." But here's the thing: the internet is full of bullshit. We already know that the younger, like us younger generations already know that.
Yeah.
If we can avoid a virus or obvious trap, we can avoid looking into bogus information.
Yes.
We've been taught that in schools. Use it in real life. That is what witchcraft is. It's not fun. It's not fun.
Like,
It can be fun, but it's not fun.
take for instance, and this applies to any of you younger generation if you are watching this video. In school, they tell you don't take your information from Wikipedia because Wikipedia, you can go on there and edit the fucking information yourself. You could quite literally go, copy, or you can highlight and delete some information. You can sit there and type in your own crap on Wikipedia. That's how you should take the craft. If you see that Wikipedia kind of shit, throw it in the trash and do some hardcore research. Look into books, because books are going to be one of the number one sources for you to find information, for you to
And
find accurate information. There is some books out there that is just straight trash. Be careful of those.
I know which one. You saw that book, and
I know what book you're talking about. Yeah, you were not happy with that book. Oh my God, that night she was raving mad over this book. I'm like,
This book was just pure crap. I like I work with the beings this book pertains to, so does Dear Copper here. And what they had in that book pertaining to these beings was straight bullshit that was pulled out of somebody's ass. I mean, for fucking real, like, why would you play these beings that way? Why would you say they're this way when they're not? Completely not.
no, because it goes against, not conventional. It goes against traditional lore of these beings.
Mhm. And
They're like because it's like, oh, these beings serve in the light of Christ, and they have no free will within the first chapter. And
no free will, my
when you
ass.
work when you work with these beings, but we'll eventually talk about these beings
Yeah, we'll have
life.
a whole episode dedicated to these beings and the
Yep.
craft of these beings, because it needs to be all on its own.
Yep. And when you look at them, you realize they don't like Christianity very much. Yeah, they'll work with Christians. They don't necessarily have a good working relationship, if that makes sense. Especially the ones of Western lore. Now, Eastern lore, that's a different story.
Mhm. Like, this will be a whole segment on its own, because there's so much information about these beings and the way you are to work with them, and the way that you are to show your respect to them, and the way that you build an altar for them, and the way that you address them. There
Mm-hmm.
is so much information on these beings that we can sit here for a whole 2 hours just talking about it. So we won't do it in this one, because we still have some other stuff to get into.
We still need to get to Amanda's story.
Yes, your story of your craft and how you came into your craft and why you want to stay in your craft.
all right, so I'm a little older than most of these people here. So I've been around a little bit longer, but I would say I've been interested in the craft since I was a child, because I used to be able to see things, and I remember seeing those things, but you know, you get raised in a family that's about God, and they're like, no, that's wrong. And then you're like, okay, whatever you say. And so I didn't really go into it until years later, when I started reading more occult books, because that's how I escaped from my world, was in books. So I was always reading little magical books, fantasy books. And then I started doing research and stuff. And I was like, hey, this is kind of cool. Spoken about trying to start that stuff, and then got shut down by my family again. Oh, that's the devil. You don't need to be doing that. And I'm like, but it's what I need to do. So, of course, I didn't do it. And then throughout the years, though, I've always been pulled to the magical stuff. It's always been a calling. It's always like, doot, doot. Hey, Amanda, are you ready? No, not yet. You know, something like that. But it wasn't until probably in the last 5 years or so that I've really started to look deeper into it. And I like to say I'm a writer. So I already started doing research. When you get a character and you make them into a mage, you start researching stuff on the internet. So you've already started the research, but you don't realize you started it years ago.
Mhm.
Because you write these characters and then you take what you learned,
Mhm.
even though it's from the internet, and you still scour the internet because you never do the first page of Google. But and you've read some of the stuff I wrote, and you've seen the magical side of
And
it.
it's absolutely amazing the details you put into it pertaining to the magical aspect. Like, yes, it is on the fantasy side, but it's also showing actual application and actual process that you have to do for the magical ritual or magical spell you're doing.
I didn't realize I knew that shit until later. You know? So I've been practicing magic, but in a different way
Mhm.
than what would be normal. And now I'm starting to really dive into it. I've done what I like to call the cleansing, the first cleansing. You know, we're like, hey, get rid of all the negative stuff in my life. Let's just try to get myself cleansed,
It's
getting
that
all that.
it's that first step into shadow work.
Yes. Yeah, you gotta like get rid of the the shadows they've been clinging on to. And even though shadow work is looking at the sides of yourself that you've repressed and then having to look at them, and you and I've don't having to look at it start to scare me because I'm like, but I'm not ready to look at them. But I've had all my signs say, if you don't start your shadow work soon, I'm gonna come for you.
My deck.
Yeah,
Not only that, my deck also called her out.
it's like,
And
if you don't start this shit now, we're coming. And
even
I'm like,
her own deck called her out.
3. I say that's a magical number right there. That's enough for me. But
But
I,
but you know what that number who that number pertains to, right?
yeah, and my tarot card 13 too. So we're not even gonna go into the whole entire jar of that just yet. That's to the
She's
side.
she's
Because
giving you so many signs.
she's been giving me signs since I was a child. A child. And I started looking at it, looking back in my life, I'm like, how did I not realize that this was the person, the entity that wanted to speak with me my entire life, who has been speaking to me? Because when you trust your intuition, and I've always trusted my intuition, if my stomach says don't do it, I don't do it. And when I'm actually doing something with the craft, I also use my intuition. And it's like, hey, you should try this. Go about this way when you're doing this. And so whenever I've done little spells and little things, I've, looked onto what I'm doing, figured, okay, this would be easy. And it never turns out the way that the spell says it's going to.
Mhm.
Like there's spells to try to do it this way, and I end up doing something totally different, and it still works.
Yep.
It's just because something guides me and tells you, like it.
Like,
I'm in the beginning, so I'm getting these little people like, hey, you should try it this way, huh? Okay, we'll try
um,
it that way.
here's so from what I've just heard, like you would look at a spell book or a grimoire and you would do the same exact thing, but it wouldn't work until you'd made that little tweak.
That makes it personally your own. And that's the whole thing about magic. One way is not going to work for the same person.
And here's the thing is that so what I do is I create my own spells, despite being a baby witch. And what I do is what I normally do is have a bunch of colored candles, and then I have a bunch of oils. I also have a bunch of herbs.
Mm-hmm.
And for each individual spell, it's very different. So one protection spell is not going to be the same as this protection spell and all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
But I still keep writing them down because it's like, well, maybe this spell is very similar. All I have to do is take or add in certain components
Yeah.
or different amounts of it.
And that also refers to, like, if you buy a book like the the
Oh, I know a book.
Green Witch Grimoire. If you buy that, there is spells in there. But the thing is you don't want to follow what they did exactly. You want to take that spell, apply it to yourself, and tweak it to yourself, because if you don't tweak it to yourself, it's not necessarily going to work.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I need to start reading these, and I need to keep them out, because if I have things away, because I may have ADHD, if I put things away, I forget that they're there. Like, I will literally forget that they're there until I open up my closet and, like, oh yeah, these are in here waiting for me. Sister got me this one for my birthday. I really want to use some of this stuff. But anyways, so I've basically always done magic, but naturally, and not realizing that you are doing it. And that sometimes that comes to some people. Like, my niece and I are the same way. Like, we've talked about this. I'm like, so it just comes to you, right? And I'm like, yeah, it just comes to me too. Like, I know what to do but I don't know what to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's weird. But you make it personal, because it's got to be tied to your own energies, to your own intentions, not somebody else's intentions that they were set for.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I'm
like
learning.
I'll say this. If you're doing it generically and it's not fully tied to your intentions, you can follow what that specific grimoire has in it, and it'll work, but only to a certain extent. It won't be as powerful as if you applied it to yourself.
And here's another thing that people need to consider is that when a person is putting their spells in, when an author is putting their spells in that book, they're literally sharing their grimoire, their personal grimoire, to the entire world.
Mm-hmm.
That is their copy, or it's going to be your copy of their grimoire. So, that being said, it's also very respectful to not copy word for word, but to create your own.
Yes.
And I learned that from my dragons because I was flipping through DJ Conway's Dancing with Dragons book. And they have spells and rituals in there. And I was sitting there, and my dragon's like, don't read this section, don't read that section. You need to learn, and you need to go into the history of dragons. In different cultures, you need to do work with the different kinds of dragons out there.
Mm-hmm.
And learn the planets, learn what, basically just kind of don't do this, don't do that, don't worry about the spell works or rituals, you'll learn that on your own and all
And
that fun stuff.
that's what I was trying to say. Ancestors. It's like your ancestors speak to you.
Your ancestors will do that. Yep.
And so if there's a witch in your ancestors, she's gonna be standing there and, like, telling you what to do.
You're gonna go, Mija, no, you need to do this. Make sure you're following it this way. Because if you sit there and do it the way it's saying here, it's
You're
gonna
gonna
fail.
fuck up.
You need to do it to you. You need to make sure it's done to you and not to what the book is saying. They sit there over your shoulder going, huh, no, 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 go do this one.
So
It's like don't
I've
accidentally.
seen the work that I put into something come to fruition, and they've seen me go ape over it because I'm like, what the I'm still in that honeymoon stage where
Mm,
everything is like, oh, look at that, it's all glittery and cool. But I'm becoming more aware of what I need to work on to get to the point that I want to be at. And I
mm.
hate that I started this late,
The
but it
thing
is what it is.
the thing is the craft can start at any point in your life. It doesn't matter how old or young you are. Age does not matter when you start the craft.
Mhm.
That's the thing. Age does not matter.
The only time it matters is when you actively start like practicing or doing spell work. Personally, I don't think you have any business doing that stuff up until you're 18.
Yes, I agree with that. If you are under the age of 18, I will suggest don't do spell work.
Just do your research.
Mhm.
Make your protective sigils because those are what's going to help you in the end too.
Yeah.
But don't do any spell. Just do your research. Understand what you're going into.
Now, what
I
makes
wait
you
to do shadow work. This is gonna be great. Sorry, I'm thinking about my niece. She's gonna have to do her shadow work because she's an angry little Scorpio.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Now,
Yeah,
what makes you want to keep going on your practice?
that it feels right. It feels what I've been needing to do my entire life. That I know this is the path I'm supposed to take.
Mhm.
That there is something there and that I'm going to find it. And it just seems more and more that I'm want to go in and get my counseling thing and take these things because I see the positive things that happens when you change just one little thought in your head and everything changes.
Just
And
like it's just like if you stand in front of a mirror and instead of saying the negative things you say about yourself, you say
Well,
positive things.
fucking hell. No.
What is it, a spider or something?
No, there's a metal right here, and it keeps on swinging, and then it stops, and then it goes back to swinging, and then it stops, and I'm not doing shit, and I'm like, oh my god, I had to go turn the light because I'm like, nope.
yep, and that's another thing working in the craft, you're going to have some really crazy stuff happen to you. And you're going to think you're nuts, but you know you're not because you're seeing things on a different vibration and a different level. When you start, like I said, it just start changing your thoughts and your energy. Like my energy has changed so significantly. Like I'm not the same person I was a couple months ago.
Mhm. You
Like I can tell a huge flip.
Oh yeah, you did. Oh
Other
yes, you
than
freaking did.
my,
I remember that one reading that we did. Like, jeez.
So, it's funny that you mentioned that because it's like things that you can see. For instance, my husband, one of the nights he was so high and he decided he was gonna go get something to eat. And my little brother's dog kept barking at the door. And he decided, while being extremely high, to go open the door. He looked out, saw that there was nothing there, but knew there was something there. My brother's dog kept barking, so he opened the door and let it in.
Of course.
It was knocking at the door to come in. You say no.
And
That's
so
why I gotta get witch's bells to put at my door.
I can make you some.
Okay, do it. Please help.
so he lets it in the door, and then he asks the dog, "Where is it at now?" And she looks over where the refrigerator is at, and he's like, "Oh, it was just hungry." He's coming into his practice. He's barely starting. He knows who he wants to work with already because he's had this calling for a very long time to work with this specific being. And so he's coming in and learning the practice now. But he's still baby witch. He's still baby witch. And he's already sensing spirits since he started his learning process, and he decided to let one in the house that
I
I
bet you
had.
that was fun wake up.
Oh no, here's the thing, we were all on call when this happened. We were all talking when this happened. I yelled at my husband and I said, "Why did you let it in?"
Yeah. Yep.
Was I
Yep.
there?
I don't know if you were there. I don't know if you had fallen asleep. This was like kind of really late at night. It was
Oh
like
yeah.
This
it,
happened like right around 2 or 3 o'clock my time when I was like.
I'm Eastern time, so I'm in bed before these bitches even go to bed. Like I'm
I
falling
don't
asleep
work
on
at
Zoom
night.
calls. Like
What are you talking about?
but no, my husband decided it was the greatest idea to let a spirit in the house that I had to kick out because he didn't know how to kick the spirit out.
so before the sage thing happened, I always used sage to cleanse the houses that I lived in.
Mhm.
Like because as soon as you walk into a place and you feel the energy is not the vibe you want it to be, I whip that thing out. I'm like, hello, no, please go. But now I'm just like, get the fuck out. But
Here's an alternative for that. Instead of using sage, you can sit there, grab a pot and a pan, and clink them bitches together, saying, "Get the fuck out of my house."
that's what we were doing. So I think we had at one point we did it, but there was something in my sister's house,
Mhm.
and every time we would go over there, you could tell.
Mhm.
But I have suppressed so much of my gift from childhood that it like I'm still trying to get that back. But even then I could still feel a change in the atmosphere when I went over to my sister's house.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, we got to get as soon as my mom's like, hey, so I saw something the other night, a dark creature standing over by the door. I was like, oh, okay. And then she goes, and your niece has seen it walk in the halls and all kinds of stuff. And then your sister has also seen it. And I'm like, they've seen it? And I'm like, I probably have seen it, but it, like I said, my gifts were suppressed at that time. But I took the sage because I was like, fuck this shit. We're gonna go sage the entire house. And I was like, grab the salt, mom, because this is gonna be a wild ride. And so I started in the kitchen and I'm walking through and I'm, saying, this is a house, this is light, and the darkness can leave. I don't remember what chant I was saying. I just found something on Pinterest. I was like, I like how that sounds. We're going to use that one. Because you can find a lot of things there too. Don't
Mhm.
trust it all, but it's still got some helpful information.
Yeah.
So I just liked the way that it sounded, and it felt like that's what needed to be said to get this thing out. And that was one of the most memorable things because I started to shake. My voice started to tremble. Like it by the time I got to the hallway. And then I went into the living room and did the living room, and then I started back into the hallway, and I got shoved into the wall. And
Oh,
something was trying to like get into me. And I was fighting like hell. And I told Mom, I was like, Mom, get in here real quick. And she's like, what's wrong? And I'm trying to talk and I can't. I like the words were heavy on my tongue. Right. And I was like, Mom, start saying the Lord's Prayer because my family's Catholic.
yeah.
So my mom always had the faith. And I'm like, start saying the Lord's Prayer because whatever this is fighting me right now. And she's like, what? I'm like, yeah, this is not going to be easy. And I had her going back behind me, salting all the windows, and we had all the windows open and all the doors open. And I'm going through the whole house. I I didn't get rid of it because here's the thing. My sister could barely ever stay in that house, so I think it attached to her after I did the
Oh.
yeah. And then but the day afterwards, I was completely drained.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I've never been this drained because when we've always cleansed our houses, it's always been, easy because we didn't have anything
Mhm.
around it. We're trying to keep it that way. But that was one of the awakening moments, I would have to say, that I knew that I needed to follow the craft because I needed to help people.
Yeah.
And that was keeping my niece and my nephew as safe as possible from whatever was there because it was not a healthy entity.
Yeah.
But my sister and her boyfriend did break up because I think he's the one who brought it in. It didn't really start happening until he started around. So I don't know if it attached to Emily or it is gone.
It's probably spiritual STDs.
It probably is. And every time I'm like, hey, Emily, let me cleanse you. No. I'm like, let me cleanse you. No.
Yeah. Here's the thing: if they don't want the help, it's one of the things that most witches stand by. If
Mm-hmm.
they don't ask for help, there's nothing you can do.
Nope.
There's nothing
You
you can
can't
do.
force a person.
No, because even if you force it, they're just gonna go back to it.
Yeah. So me and Kendall one day when she's not there, we're gonna run around the house and cleanse it real quick. Because I was like, I walked into the house and I'm like, this energy is not your energy. You really need to get rid of it because of the people who lived there before.
Mhm.
I'm like, they were literally still in the house, moving out their stuff the day that my sister was supposed to move in. Like they hadn't even. My sister and her girlfriend helped them pack their rest of their stuff. Yeah. So like I'm like, Emily, we need to cleanse the house.
Yeah.
Like these people's energy was not good. But
And it's funny that we're talking about cleansing because it goes into a bit of
protect.
energy work and protection. So energy work, the way you find out your energy, like you start to know what your energy feels like, is basically you take your hands, put it like this, let the energy fill that space, and kind of just let it like feel it pushing your hands apart. It's almost like a ball, like you're holding a ball in your hand. And as you're doing that, try and use your sight to see your energy because then you can see what your energy looks like and then you can recognize your energy.
Yep.
Done this before.
I've taught you this.
Not just you, no, somebody no, a long time ago. I read it somewhere and
Yes.
I started doing it and I stopped for some reason, but could feel it like starting to grow in between my hands. Your hands would start getting really super warm.
Uh-huh, and it would feel like it's
And then you can
pulsating.
feel it and it's like expands and you moving your hands without you even really thinking about it.
Even
And
when
then you
you bring
start
your hands this close together. If you notice, my hands keep pushing and pulling.
Yeah.
Now, when my mentor first, when I first met my mentor and everything, um, I said I was told that at one point in my life, I was told that I have healing hands. So I told her that, and she's like, okay, give me your, what's your dominant hand? My right hand. She's like, okay, let me see it real quick. And, she put it down on the little coffee table that they had at the time. And, um, she used her non-dominant hand because her dominant hand was broken because she punched the shit out of someone, literally. Um, and she's like, "Ooh, that's interesting." Um, and indeed, I do have healer's hands, um, and I do emit energy.
Hmm.
Um, I'm a energy generator while she amplifies things.
Yeah. There's one other thing that I can't remember which hand is the one that takes in and which hand is the one that takes or puts out.
Typically, your dominant hand is the emitter. The
Okay.
non-dominant is going to be the one
So
that uh,
I'm
takes.
right-handed. So the energy I emit comes from my right hand.
Yep.
But you notice when you start shaking people's hands, usually your non-dominant hand is the one that goes to shake.
Actually, my dominant hand is.
Majority of the time for me, it's always my non-dominant hand. So there's things that you have to do to protect yourself from taking any negative energy when you're shaking somebody else's hand. And if you see, I wear two specific rings. One is my wedding ring, and one is my husband's class ring. Both of these are charmed with protections, and it protects you from what the charms I have on here protects me from taking somebody's negative energy without knowing. Because what I usually do, the way I work with my hands, is I'll take your negative energy, run it through me, turn it positive, and give it back. So that way your negative's leaving and positivity is coming back. That way you have more of a positive day happening. But when I don't want it to happen unintentionally, I make sure I'm always wearing these rings. Because the protective charms I have on here, one is a protective charm to protect my energy, and the other charm that I have is to protect energy coming in. So if I'm pulling in energy, it's to protect me from not pulling in negative energy if I don't want that at that moment.
Right. With me, it's like I have to learn how to control giving out my energy
Hmm. And
because typically you'll find me ungrounded, which I'm trying to teach myself how to ground myself multiple times throughout the day. Um, and lately I feel more grounded because of the smackdown that I just had for the last couple weeks. Um, and I'm a very airy person. Um, and so my problem is that people would like to take energy from me, so I have to make protections in order to prevent myself from emitting that, not only emitting that energy, but also from people taking that. I can't hear you.
did it again. I did it again. But ways to to get your energy under regulation so you're not emitting too much or you're not taking in too much is meditation. And
Yes.
I know a lot of people have a hard time with meditation. The thing is, meditation doesn't have to be you sitting there going, oh, listening to the music that you're supposed to, going, oh, you don't have to do that. Meditation can take place in art. You're sitting and drawing or writing or something that creatively releases your energy to yourself, but also helps you control it and understand it and level it out so you're not
Yes.
emitting so much. The stress of the days and the anger and the pent up feelings you have can cause you to emit too much energy.
Yep.
And it could be positive
Sorry.
or negative energy.
And here, oh, sorry, Amanda.
I was just thinking, like, what do I do to meditate? I play The Sims. Like, when I start
And
You
playing
here's
The Sims,
what
I zone
meditation really,
out.
at its fundamental core, is. It's basically telling your mind to shut the fuck up.
mhm.
It's basically saying, I'm going to not think, I'm going to draw, or I'm going to read, I am going to play video games. My mind will not be engaged.
Well,
And
engaged, but I zone out. Like when I'm
yeah,
playing it, I don't
basically
realize that
zoning out.
been playing it for 4 hours,
Yes. And
sitting there.
that is meditation in itself because that moment you start to zone out, everything in your brain has silenced. Everything that has been stressful, everything that has given you any kind of negative thoughts, anything that has mentally messed with you during that day is completely silenced and you're focused on what you are doing.
Yep.
Meditation doesn't have to be sitting in a quiet place doing the ohms and sitting cross legged on the floor. No, you can be laying in a bed, you can be sitting in a chair, you can be playing video games, you can be drawing, you can be walking, you can be writing, you can be running.
Yep. And there's also another aspect of energy work that I think should, or not forever, it should be mentioned, especially for beginners, is working with your chakras
Mhm.
and getting those not only brought into alignment but cleared up of all the muck and stuff. And that's kind of what shadow work is there to help with.
So,
Um,
one of my favorite things that you mentioned chakra. If anybody has watched Avatar The Last Airbender, there is a specific episode in the cartoon, and it's an episode where he has to clear up his chakras, and um, the guru is showing it through the streams and how the streams they're clogged up and they are filled with algae and all this bad stuff and moss. But he shows if you clear your paths all the way down, it creates a beautiful flowing flow of water.
mhm.
Now, when you focus on releasing those chakras and focusing on the energy, you do it through meditation, yes, but your meditation doesn't have to be what they tell you to do. You can be doing your extracurricular things that you do, but you also focus on that specific chakra spot. So if you
And
need to work on that root chakra, you focus where the root chakra is and where it sits. So you need to learn where each chakra sits in the body.
there's also, we'll get into, hopefully we'll talk about, what the chakras are in a different live,
Yes.
uh,
I need to
because
find
that's a whole entire section on its own. Each chakra has their own meanings, their own purposes, their own locations. You also have sub chakras, which kind of branch out into the body,
You have some in your hands.
in your feet. Um,
You have ones
and
that also go above your chakra. Just
yeah,
so you know, it does come out into your aura too, not just on the
yeah.
body.
You also have to take care of your aura. You have to take energy work is very extensive, but it's one of those things that um really needs to be focused on by baby witches because they are very susceptible to quite a few of the dangers
Hmm.
out there.
So I will say our next live will be focusing on the energy, we'll be focusing on the chakras, we'll be focusing on how to protect them as well. Um, like we want to make sure that you have a well-rounded understanding of what chakras are. We want you to have a well understanding of energy work. We also want you to have a well understanding of protections. Protections
Mhm.
are completely necessary if you are practicing because if you're not protecting your sacred space or the space you're working in, other entities can come and portray themselves as the one you're trying to call out to, or be there and siphon the energy you're trying to use for that spell or ritual.
Or imagine being paralyzed and then having an assassin come up and slit your throat.
Pretty much. And protections are necessary. And the thing is, protections come in many forms. They can be actual spells that you do. They can be herbs that you use or burn in your home. They can be oils. They can be drawing a sigil or just
Like
drawing.
imagination, using your imagination
Hmm.
is protection
And
sometimes.
then your own energy can also be your protection. Your own energy, if you apply your energy to be your own protection, you can
Mhm.
make that your own protection.
Now
Like,
it's also should be noted that you need to layer your protections. You
hmm,
cannot just rely on just one because a lot of people and a lot of entities like to attack multiple
I
times
don't know.
in one
This
sitting.
this is what I've been using every from the couple days before the full moon and after. I
oh,
like this, and I, cleanse the house, clean floors, that kind of thing.
hmm,
And
Good protect. There's a lot of
smells
good protective herbs.
so good. But I really like this. I got it at my local crystal shop, and I do recommend it as something to go ahead and try one day.
hmm.
Yep.
And
But this was the alternative I did to lighting sage.
yeah, and what you can do is you can learn essential oils. You can learn the different herbs and you can find out which ones are for the specific protections. And using those specific protect those oils, for instance, using those specific oils, each oil is a different protection. You are essentially layering your protection using four different oils that are meant for protection. So you have now four different layers to your shield.
Yep.
And it's good to layer up because if you don't layer up, whatever is trying to attack you can do one hit, your shield's down, and then they can come back in about 5 seconds to an hour to the next day and hit you again if you don't sit there and have layers.
Yep.
Because
Because I'm aware I have let's see, one, two. I mm, I would say about 4 or 5 different layers.
I may be a little extensive. This is another reason why I'm called the Shield Maiden. I have about 10 different shields.
Damn. Oh wait, no.
That's just shields. That's not adding into other things that you also have.
Like
Yeah,
ward. That's including the wards because wards are basically protection spells.
they're
Like
heavy. They're a heavier duty version of a protection spell.
yep.
So they're a heavier layer to protection when you do a ward.
Hmm.
Okay.
Like one
I need to.
effective ward. After you've cleansed and replaced the energy of your home, you get these little coffin nails or even old railroad spikes, and you drive them into every direction, so north, east, south, and west. And you do
How do you
not
do that if
touch
you live
them.
in an apartment,
Do
though?
not touch them until you are ready to take down those wards, such as in the case when you are
So
resetting or you're moving.
so here's the thing for apartments, you can actually have a table that's in your home, like an altar space or a table that you don't mind driving these nails into, and you can place them on that, and that protects that home, that puts that ward up in your home if you're in an apartment.
I
Yep.
did that. And that was like my first time doing that. I didn't even realize I did that.
But that's
Okay, continue.
there's some wards that you take down. There's some wards that you don't dare touch, even if you move or you're resetting. You just keep them there.
Hmm.
Um, and it
Because
really depends on what you want and what you need.
because trying to take down the wards that are the ones that take took a lot to build and put up are the ones that are hardest to take down, and they take more energy then it's necessary. So it's better to just leave them. And what happens is whoever moves in next kind of resets that ward and protects that home still.
Yep.
And if
Like
they
that ward
are,
kind of forms. It's like one of those plastic bubbles that reform after like a person enters it, and
mhm.
you know.
And if they're a practicing witch that moves into your old home, they'll see that you have a ward there. You can even let them know that you have a ward there. And then they can go ahead and re up that ward with their energy. So it's a lot less work and it's a lot less energy draining on the person.
Yep. Um.
But protections are absolutely necessary if you're practicing. There's too many unknown variables that can happen that can affect you, your energy, the people around you when you are practicing. Because
Yeah.
what happens in the spiritual world when you start to practice, you tend to become a beacon. Almost you turn into this light that is shown to the spiritual world. They're like, "Oh, look, there's somebody that might be able to see us. Let's go to them." And if you don't have the protections, they're coming straight for you. And Izzy pointed out, especially with Ouija boards, if you are playing with the Ouija board in
Ooh.
your home, you have opened up a portal in your home to allow these beings to come in and out.
Same thing with fairy doors. Don't bring fairy doors into your house.
I know they're
So,
cute. I know they're cute. I know they're pretty. Don't do it. Don't. Don't do it. Don't.
like if you're gonna get, you know, one of those boards where you can communicate with spirits, do not go to the game store and buy the Ouija board. That's a big no-no. Go to your local witch store and buy a homemade $100 freaking witch board, because I guarantee you that witch board has more protections on it than that cheap piece of, cardboard that you can get for what, $2.
So here's another thing. If you are wanting to communicate with the spirits and you're wanting a ward to do so, you need to take all proper precautions. And this is not for a Ouija board, this is talking about a witch's board. You need to take all the precautions, make the salt circles, protect your area, protect the room that you are in. Usually don't do it in your home if you can. If you can be outside of your home or somewhere else, I would suggest you do it that way. It's going to protect you
Also,
better.
and you also, when you are trying to communicate with a spirit, you need to know who exactly you're going to be talking to. It's kind of like, um, basically making a phone call. It's like,
Mhm.
hey, I want to talk to my grandma. Then you ask a series of questions where you verify it's your grandma, not something else.
And you've got to make sure it's something that the spirits wouldn't know. And it's
Yeah,
something that was completely told in confidence between you and the specific entity you are looking for.
right.
Because
Um,
if you just go willy nilly, anybody could answer that phone and be like, "Hey," because it's like a payphone. It's not like a cell phone where you can call that person directly. It's like a payphone, and someone can walk up and be like, "Hello." No, this person's not here, but you can talk to me. Do you want to talk to some demon named Joe? Do you want to talk to some demon named Joe?
do
No.
you want to name, Satan's best friend? His name is Joe. He likes to come over, play video games every once in a while, maybe scare a few kids here and there. Um,
Come
maybe
out
eat a baby or
Halloween.
two. You know, and he just likes to hang out and everything.
You don't want to contact that demon Joe, because next thing you know, you got a fucking candle flying across the room that's lit. Like, oh shit. Well, my house is going up in flames. Fuck.
True.
Yeah, I told them the story of when you invited a ghost in the house. For anyone that's watching, I was talking to my husband. He's actually in the background. But yeah, protections are necessary. Look into protections, look into the different forms of protection, look into verbal protections because you can even just verbally call it protection and it will become a layer.
Yep. And like there's a lot of the minor protections that we are mentioning, they will do in a pinch, but if at all possible, try and strive for making more powerful and larger protections around yourself so
Like
that
the
yeah, like
when I charm these, this specific ring has not only a charm but a ward on it. This is a warded ring. This ring protects my energy, protects the energy of somebody who's trying to give me that energy unintentionally. And
yep.
then this one, my wedding ring, this is a charmed protective ring. It's just a protection spell. It's not a ward that's on it. It's just a protection. So if I'm not wearing this one still does the same thing but at a lower caliber. It's not exactly the same. It doesn't do exactly everything that the ward does for me.
And to put it in kind of like more not layman's terms, but very very simplified and easy to follow. If any of y'all are D&D players or Pathfinder players, it's the difference between um like you know acid splash and like a freaking ray of acid, or just a much larger acid attack.
hmm And then on top of the rings that I wear that are also charmed, my necklace, the two that I wear, this one, as you can see, we do have the same necklace. Not only are we connected through the necklace, we've also charmed these to have a strong ward protection on them to protect us whenever we decide to practice together.
Yep.
And then this one, this is a no touchy touchy. No touchy touchy. You touchy touchy, you can say goodbye to all your energy. Because this is a protective thing for me. But what it also does, if somebody tries to touch it or if somebody tries to take it, they immediately get zapped of all their energy and they feel like they're gonna fall asleep.
My little dragon lost a tooth.
Oh no!
But
Because
this is a
this.
this is a protective charm. I also have an eagle
hmm
one in my bathroom that's basically a protective charm.
because this not only this here holds my entire energy in it. And not just my energy. It holds one of the beings I work with energy in here too. And so if I need that extra boost in energy or if I need that extra protection and it's a massive protection, I put this on and I wear this. I don't wear this all the time. I wear this for very specific reasons.
Yeah.
I usually wear it for whenever I'm going live because yes, you can receive and take energy through a camera when you're seeing someone. When you are on a voice call like this, I could sit there and if I wanted to, pull on Copper's energy and take it and boost myself. But you also can sit there and send energy to that specific person in their specific location in their specific region. As long as you have this kind of connection where you can visibly see them and their energy, you can send and take energy. It's
Any
another thing
input?
about energy work.
Any input that you want to put in, Amanda?
No, I'm kind of just taking notes a little bit, like find something that I can charm and ward to wear outside of the house because I
Yeah.
don't have anything like that. And it's very draining out there lately.
Another
But
form of
every
protection. Oh. Yeah, another form of protection that I think people ought to know, um, really is to avoid things that drain you, avoid politics, avoid talking about religion with your family, avoid um, engaging in draining behaviors such as certain recreational drugs. Um, avoid, basically any unhealthy situations. Um, because in some instances, those, like, yeah, it's all fun and games, and everything in some instances, but at the same time, you're very susceptible to not only attack from various entities and people, but you're also attacking yourself in a sense. That's kind of why I avoid going on to certain social media sites such as Twitter and Facebook, because those environments are very toxic. I
Mhm.
avoid trying to talk to friends who engage in recreational marijuana. Now I have no issue with recreational marijuana, but with the people that I've met, um, they're not necessarily the most wholesome. Um, so it's like I avoid engaging in that kind of community. Um, and I avoid talking religion with, certain individuals in my immediate circle. I avoid trying to talk about politics, but that's kind of hard considering what we were dealing with this year, and it's just, ugh.
This whole year has some people want to avoid it, but we something.
We
Somebody
really can't. It's an addiction. It's really an addiction.
somebody decided to play Jumanji and has fucked everything.
I
That's
mean,
that's what this year is. Somebody decided it was a great idea to play Jumanji with the whole world.
Now, that's not to say that there are good things that have happened this year. There
Yes,
certainly
a
have
lot of
been,
shit
but
happened.
it's kind of like, boy, it's just
a
this
lot of the
Everybody,
year is
anybody watching would
shadow with what
understand.
we
If
do
you
with.
just see our faces.
the
They
thing,
they get it. We all get it.
the thing is that the good that did come out of this year is overshadowed by the amount of bad that has happened.
Yeah,
It's
The amount
completely
of hate.
overshadowed.
and I think and also another reason why I think a lot of people are not seeing the good in this year is because it's not being covered like it should be.
It's not. The big news companies and stuff always never show the true light on the things that need to be shown. And there's a lot of stuff in our world that is going on in our country that is going on that we don't know about and that we find out about later on after it's already been applied.
Yep.
And it's never good
Mm-mm.
because that's how
And
they do the sneaky sneak and fuck over all us Americans.
it's not just, here in America or the world. What happens, and what I've noticed, and why I kind of avoid looking at modern news and, social media, is because what they do is they intentionally um will show all these bad things because it can be sensationalized. People like tragedy, they like drama. That's what gets the views, that's what gets the money. So they'll show you all this shit, and psychologically, whether you notice it or not, you're going to be depressed. You're going to think that life in general is shitty, and that, you don't want to bring up children in this world or whatnot.
Mhm.
But you don't, and they don't, like, occasionally they'll show you like the really good stuff and everything, but in reality, they don't want to show you the good stuff.
Yeah.
They're intentionally trying to make you feel like crap.
Mhm. And like that's the whole reason I don't watch the news. Well, I don't really watch TV unless I'm like watching Netflix, Hulu, or
It's basically without all the ads and stuff.
yeah, I choose to watch things without ads, and I choose to watch things that are actual shows and not the news or this other crap that's being shown.
Yep. Um, so that's just another form of protection that people ought to know. It's not. It's like don't seclude yourself from modern day events. Definitely look into them, but don't let them control how you think.
Yeah. And that's why if I do want to look into what's going on in our country or in the world, I just do a simple Google search and it brings up what I need to see, what is currently going on, and why that's I just don't want to sit and watch all the fluff and huff from a news station.
Basically, all I do is I would Google modern day news and everything because I know even online it's kind of bullshit. I'll get the general rundown. Okay, whatever, this is happening, this is that, or that's happening. All right, I'm good. I'm informed, or I am aware of the situation. I just don't know the details about it.
Mhm.
Now, if it does catch my interest and it's something that legitimately concerns me, then I will look more into it through multiple sources, um, and draw my conclusions from there.
Yeah.
Kind of like what you have to do when you're researching in the craft.
Mhm.
You have to look through multiple sources before you draw your conclusion. And it's not necessarily easy either.
No.
Um, because you also have the issue of confirmation bias, because you have your own biases already in place. And sometimes it's the first few that would confirm your bias, and you would listen to them more than you would listen to somebody who says, wait, I disagree
Yeah.
with this, or this is what the situation is to us. So I would be aware with for that, or be aware of that. There we go.
But that is kind of all we wanted to talk about today. Um I hope you guys took something from this. I hope you listened and listened with a grain of salt and took away what you wanted from it. And I am glad for anyone that did watch. I'm glad that you came here and saw and heard our stories and heard our information that we're pulling for everyone.
You were
Um,
in
I greatly love each and every single one of you, my dear random weirdos. Take each day differently. Take each day with a positive note. Take each day knowing you are loved and we're here for you. I love you, my random weirdos. You guys are fantastic. Continue going forth and being weird, because you got to be the weirdo in the group.
Yo,
Bye, guys.
bye.